All right, thanks you all for coming. I'm gonna be talking to you today about inclusive design. My name is Job van Achterberg. On ham radio, I'm Papa Delta 5 Juliet Oscar Bravo, and on Twitter, I'm Detonate. So I'm a freelance software developer. One of the things I work on is Ovid's MMORPG that he spoke about yesterday. I am responsible mostly for front-end development and making sure it's accessible. I'm also a firefighter, but it's not important. So, inclusive design, or as it's also called, universal design. What is it? Well, in meat space, this would be an example. Here's a set of stairs, here's a ramp. This is awesome, because the ramp means people in wheelchairs can use it. Push your bike up on it. You can push a baby in a stroller up on it. Old people with walkers, they can use it. And you could, well, yeah, you could. So there's many types. This one is maybe a bit dangerous. If you missteer, you might get hurt. Some of them are even more dangerous. This is a wheelchair ramp that just suddenly ends in midair. And some of them have deadlock problems. So this is a wheelchair ramp available, but you gotta inquire within. I'm reading my slides out in case somebody without sight will eventually want to know what I'm talking about. But still, this seems kind of bolted on instead of built in, because you're basically saying, oh, you know, wheelies on the right, walkies on the left. It doesn't really seem inclusive, but it's a good start. So what would be a better case of inclusive design? One I like is pedestrian traffic lights, because you can hear them. They make a noise when you can't walk. They make a noise when you can walk. You can feel them. Well, usually, I mean, there's even either touch buttons or buttons that you really have to press or that you only have to lightly touch. Colorblind people can distinguish between red and green easily because the shapes will also change. And so this is built well to kind of work for everybody. So the general rule of inclusive design in the real world is to make it usable. And usually when you make stuff usable, it therefore also becomes accessible. And that is great. Within realistic boundaries, because some things just won't work out very well. So, how does this apply to web development? So I'll quote, you know, some web developer on that, who said he didn't say that. He said this. He says the power of the web is in its universality. Access by everybody, regardless of disability, is an essential aspect. Universality, that is quite important. The web was built for everybody, to be used by everybody, to be built by everybody. That's great. So how do we do that? How do we make sure that it is universally accessible? And there's a way for that. It's the Web Accessibility Initiative, and that is part of the W3C, which is the standards body of the web, and it's headed by Tim Berners-Lee himself. And what they do is they have a set of guidelines, the WCAG, and the WCAG stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And they're a set of good practices that you can follow to make sure that whatever you build for the web is accessible and usable for all. So, there are 4 principles of accessibility. Perceivable. Can you see it? Operable. Can you control it? Can you use it? Understandable. Is this clear? Does the interface clearly tell you what it's intended to be used like? Robust. Can you, for instance, use it responsively on multiple viewports? Can you, if you have to enter a date picker, if you have to enter a date, can you use a date picker? Or can you also enter it manually? Can you just enter flat text and let the system figure it out? Is there more than one way to do it, which you all should like? So, that stands for POUR, and I say good design is poor design. So make poor choices, people. A1YY is the numeronym for accessibility, like I18N is internationalization. You'll see this a lot on Twitter once you all get into this stuff, which I know you will. It's awesome. So, another thing that the Y does is they make a spec, which is part of the HTML spec, and it's called ARIA. Stands for Accessible Rich Internet Applications, and it's basically a set of attributes that you can use to give semantic value to the DOM. Am I microphone's good? Cool. So An example of giving semantics to the DOM. Here we have an H2. It's a story title, something about undead pearl. I mean, we are in Transylvania. It's got a button. The button says, okay, area expanded, so something can expand is true, and it controls something called story. That's the idea of something else. And the button says read more. We've all seen this. This is a bad example. Don't do read more. And here's a div with, why won't Pearl die? And this idea, story, associates with the controls here. And basically you're saying to anybody, to assistive technologies, this is how this DOM works together. Will be a lot more examples of this. So there's also a set of native roles on DOM elements. For instance, low quiz, what's the native role of a button? Anyone? Button. So what's the native role of anchor? Link. What's the native role of a div? Doesn't have one. What is it now? I like that you say that. Don't do this. But now it's a link. So, it's like calling Perl PHP. Why would you do that? So, demo time. Let's see how fast am I going. I did this in 10 minutes. All right. So I got to switch a bit because it's this whole demo thing. Hang on. This is To Do MVC. It's a project on GitHub where if you want to try out a JavaScript framework, you can see examples of always the same To Do MVC written in that specific framework. So this is vanilla.js. This is the default. Isn't that nice and easy to see? Awesome. So let's see if we can make it a bit more visible. High contrast mode. Doesn't help. So let's work on that. What we have here, is this readable to everybody? Better. It's responsive. This is good. So what I've got is a git diff and the base version that we have and what the git diff did. I changed the heading opacity. Suddenly it's so much easier to see. And there was only one line of code. That's great. So we're going to do more because we like this. So next, what do we got next? Perceivable. So I'm preceding each commit with which part of the WCAG spec it applies to. So increase the footer paragraph contrast and font size. Because that footer, that wasn't easy to read. And we really want to know who built this. So all we do is, I should get my clicky thingy. We change the color of the P to be a bit more black, like my color, my soul color. And we change the font size a bit. So what do we get? Here's our base version. And here's the new, this is so much easier to read. I mean, I didn't even have to strain my eyes. So, next up, increase the input placeholder contrast. That placeholder, I mean, look at it. Is there a placeholder? It says what needs to be done. Okay, well, we probably should get one, so what needs to be done? Okay, I can press enter. I have a to-do. Might as well explain how this works while we're at it. So you can have a to-do, in this case buy garlic or buy, well, can't type with one hand, wooden steaks. Cool. So you can check them. Oh look, did you guys see there was a checkbox there? No, you didn't. So this is what we're doing. Okay, so increase the input placeholder contrast. So what does that look like? It's basically a whole bunch of weird CSS selectors. There, at some point, there's going to be a lot of div code, and I don't expect you to follow it all because you won't have all the context of all the surrounding code. It's more illustrative. Small changes make huge differences in making the web accessible. So we just changed the color of these placeholders. Oh, what needs to be done? Suddenly we know that there's a placeholder. Placeholders still suck. More on that later. So what's next? Clearly indicate the checkbox. Now I've already ruined it because I pointed it out, but there's a checkbox there. So that's an SVG because, you know, average checkboxes suck. They're ugly. So let's use an SVG instead. Yeah, I don't know. There's a whole bunch of stuff I could fix in this that I'm not even getting to because it's too much work. So let's change this SVG. Okay, that's easy. Just change the color in here and there a bit. So here's my checkbox. There it is. That's already a bit better. But also this tells you something about projectors. They're often a lot brighter than you think. Alright, so what else? Strong contrast for the completed checkbox. Very important, because if I complete the checkbox, okay, I can sort of see it. Well, this is better. This is clearly checked. Didn't take much, just some background color. So, footer information and filter control contrast. Yeah, that's just some border color, because those bottom filters here, they're kind of hard to read. So, okay, this is suddenly a lot easier to read. Great. Small change, just some color and border. Contrast is such a huge win. Completed task contrast. Alright, what about color change? Easy. Alright, we have a completed task. Nice. Just a dark color. All we need. Why do these designs have to be like, you'd better be looking? If I'm in the outside with my cell phone checking my to-do list and there's sun on my screen, I'm not going to be able to read the original one. It won't work. So, next up. Task removal contrast button, just more contrast. This is all perceivable, so it will mostly be dealing with text size, font color, contrast. More of that, okay, the task removal. Where is the task removal button? Where is it? There it is. If you hover, have you ever tried hovering on a cell phone? That's fun. Okay, so in the original, it's kind of hard to see. All I did was change the color a bit. Next up, always show it. Yes, because we should know how our interface works. All right, so here it isn't, here it is. Great. Oh, there's a little X there. That probably means delete. Labels, very important. So, what else? Operable. Okay. Yeah, make keyboard focus visible. I'm now in operable, but do we agree that this is a lot better to see, a lot easier to read? Yeah? Okay, let's see what you get if you're blind.
Voiceover on. What needs to be done? Insertion at beginning of text. What needs to be done?
What?
Edit text. Main one item. Voiceover off.
This is voiceover. It's built in OSX. You can press Command F5, you'll get a beautiful voice. Or another one depending on your configuration. But this is basically just a tool that reads what the browser gives you. So the more semantic, the more semantic your HTML, the better way the screen reader can do of figuring out what's going on.
Voiceover on. Chrome. Presentation. Window. What? Heading level 1. To-dos. Heading level 1. To-dos. What needs to be done? Heavy right pointing angle quotation mark ornament. Unchecked. Checkbox. List 2 items. Buy garlic. Times group. Checked. Checkbox. Buy garlic. Times button. Buy wooden
What's
stakes.
times?
Times group. Unchecked. Checkbox.
All right.
Buy wooden stakes.
This is a
times
checkbox?
button. 1. Item left. List 3 items. All. Link. Group. Visited. Link. All.
Wait,
active.
it's a link?
Link. Group. Visited. Link. Active. Completed.
I wonder where that link
group.
goes.
Link. Completed. Clear completed. Button. Double click to edit a to-do. Created by Link. Oscar
Yeah, yeah,
Godson. Refactored by Link. Voiceover off.
All right. So if you really can't see what's going on, you're going to have trouble figuring out what this does. But we can make this so much better with little changes. That's all it takes. So let's move on. Make keyboard focus visible. Yeah, because we haven't tried using the keyboard. All right, let's see. Keyboard. Just going to use tab. All right, my cursor went somewhere. Where did it go? Oh, God. Oh, now I'm here. Yeah, good luck with that. So, little change. They said outline none, outline none. Please never turn off your outline. If you turn off your outline, make sure you replace it with something better. So, current version, let's step through it. Oh, that's nice. Okay, can you use this? Look, oh, I know exactly what I can do. Tiny change. World of difference. I mean, you want to see it if you're using a keyboard. You're not going to see it if you're using a mouse. You don't care. Next up, add item, edit button. Because you can edit items. Did you guys know? Because it's a double click to edit to. Have you tried double clicking on a cell phone? That's fun. Or try double clicking, you know, if you're just using a keyboard or screen reader. Yeah, no. All right, so we add an item edit button and some styling. This is basically just some HTML, and here's a button, and it says edit, and it has a little Unicode. All right. It seems it didn't reload. There we go. All right. There's the edit button. There's no code for it yet, so it doesn't do anything. But there it is. So I wonder what the screen reader makes of it.
Voiceover on. Heavy. Pencil button.
Pencil. Okay. Still doesn't tell us much, but at least it's there.
Voiceover off.
Next up, use edit button to modify. All right, now we're getting somewhere. Bunch of JavaScript. Ugh. We don't like JavaScript. So, use as you show to compare by now, but at least the current's there. I think at this point there was still a bug in it, but I think I can at least click it. No, I can't. Okay. Do I have to reload this thing each time now? Oh, okay. I think there was a bug here. Yeah. Sort of. Okay, but I could use the keyboard. All right, so next up. Add save and cancel changes controls. Because, yeah, if you don't know, you can press enter or escape to cancel or save. And how are you going to do that, you know, if you don't know it? It's just kind of trial and error. And trial and error makes the user think of how to use your software. And why would you want to make them think? You want them to use it. Just tell them how. Okay, so we add some controls. It's just a bunch of CSS and JavaScript, like all we do. Endless days of CSS and JavaScript. All right, so a little save button, little cancel button, cross mark, X mark, Unicode, fine. All right, let's go back to our current version, which maybe shows it now. I'm not sure why this stopped updating. Oh, well, it works now. Cool. I wonder what VoiceOver says.
Voiceover on. Grown. Checkmark button. List one item. Valid X button.
Doesn't tell us much. I mean, checkmark, yeah, what the hell.
You are currently on a button.
I
inside
know,
the
I
list.
know.
To click the
Yes,
unchecked checkbox.
Is it off? Okay. So, that worked. Next up. Understandable. Because we can operate, but maybe we don't understand. So we want to clarify what these controls do. So we put a little header in there, a label we style, some padding, okay, some HTML. We put a title in there and I have an encoding problem that I haven't been able to fix. Patch is welcome. An H1. I made to-dos into to-dos because my default voiceover was South African. It says todos, which just sounded like a Spanish dish. And, important, a label, because this tells the input for new to-do, oh, this is what you're about, this is what you're for. And there's a toggle all input, and what did I do? Oh, I gave it a class for some styling. Okay. Because that toggle all thing you can use to toggle all the to-dos, which you kind of have to just know. So what did this do? Clarify the controls.
Voiceover on. Heavy pencil button. Times button.
Okay, which one's in
Pencil. Heavy right pointing angle quotation menu. 11 items. Closing menu. Dimmed unchecked. Check. Leaving frame. Example. Buy groceries. Insert. Add new to do. Heading level 1. To do. Yes. Heading level 1. To do. Yes.
It's not so
new to
easy.
do. Example. Buy groceries. Mark all as complete. Unchecked. Checkbox. List 1 item. Buy garlic. Pencil times group. Unchecked. Checkbox. Voiceover off.
Okay, so we're getting there because it said example buy groceries. It said, okay, add new to do. The toggle button was now read out as, okay, toggle all items. So that's getting better. More control labeling. Yeah, that's good. So here's a little assistive class that hides an element off screen so you can't see it, but it gets read out with the screen reader. And there are some area labels. So this basically says indicate this DOM element with this descriptive name to whatever assistive technology tries to interpret it. And here I used assistive div span, to say, okay, this one means save changes. And I do that for a reason.
Voiceover on. Chrome. Presentation. Window. Example. Buy groceries. Mark all. Edit to do. Button.
Okay. Edit to do.
Buy garlic. Insertion at end of text. Edit text.
Okay.
Save changes. Checkmark. Button.
That's assistive.
Cancel changes. Button.
That's a real label. They both work.
Voiceover off.
Is that noise bothering anyone? Otherwise I can just keep plugging and unplugging. Is it okay? Alright. Alright, so associate the task label with the checkbox. So we have these tasks and they have, descriptions, but they're not associated with the checkbox. So VoiceOver keeps saying, oh, there's a checkbox and there's text and there's checkbox and there's text. So I improved the assistive class a bit, which is a better way than just hiding off screen. You just make sure it has basically 0 dimensions. So instead of having this input here with a label, we say, okay, here's the input. It is associated with its own unique ID, and here's the label that associates with that input. And then I did some more regexing because the original one did only one replace. All right, cool. So if I read them out now.
Voiceover on. Chrome. Presentation. Window. Presentation. HTML. Presentation. HTML content. Heading level 1. Understandable. Is delete to do. Button. Edit to buy garlic. Unchecked.
Buy
Checkbox.
garlic. Unchecked. We now know the task is unchecked. Tiny change. Makes it
You are
really
currently on
better
checkbox.
understandable.
Inside. Voiceover off.
All right, rewrite the filter links into buttons because these are links. So you can see, well, you can't see it because we're in an iframe, but they basically use the URL to indicate what you're doing. So what you're filtering on, why not just make them buttons? Because that's what they are for. Actually, this should be a radio button, but they went with 3 links, so I made them into 3 buttons. It should probably be a radio button because that's just really more semantically what that's for. So, rewrite the filter links in the buttons. Fun, fun, fun. This is a shitload of code. Binding of event handlers, yada, yada, yada. buttons. Okay, with some data attribute to make sure I can keep track of what's being filtered. The important thing is what we're telling,
Voiceover on.
what
Example,
we're describing.
Edit, delete all. Button, list 3 items.
Button list, 3 items.
Active button.
Okay, cool.
Completed button.
All right, so there are
Active
buttons that
all
say
button.
something. Getting there, not perfect, but getting close. What's next?
Leak.
Whoops.
Banner 1 item.
Quiet.
Voiceover off.
Filter heading, visual grouping, so a bit of visual stuff. This now says filters, and these are grouped visually a bit better so you can more clearly see what these are for. Okay, so they're filters. Yeah. Indicate the current active filter. It's a bit of JavaScript munging, but I want, because we already indicate it visually, but we don't indicate it accessibly. So all we did here, make sure I've reload frame.
Voiceover. Delete the do all. Selected toggle button. List 3
Toggle
items.
button list. Okay, these are toggle buttons.
Active button. Completed.
Doesn't work perfectly yet.
Completed button.
We'll get there later.
Active. Unchecked. Checkbox.
Because now it's a checkbox. No, it's not. It's a toggle button. This is my fuck up. I fix that later.
You are currently on a checkbox. Voiceover off.
So this is nice. We in CSS, for you CSS nerds out there, we can use area attributes like any attributes to now also style. So we can use our accessibility additions to also indicate visual clarity. So I could, kind of refactor those nasty 3 lines into this nicer 1 line. Doesn't otherwise do anything. So perceivable and understandable. We want to indicate the press state by default to force toggle button semantics. That's a lot of words. What that means is I want an area label. I want to, because they said active completed. What the hell does that mean? Okay, so this is clearly what they say. They have a area pressed false by default unless they're true, and that will also fix the unchecked checkbox problem. So
Voiceover on. Grown. Presentation. Window. Back. Edit. Delete. Show all items. Selected. Toggle button. Show only active items. Toggle button. Show only completed items. Toggle button. Show only active items. Toggle button. Show only completed items. Toggle button. Show only active items. Selected. Toggle button. Voiceover off.
all right, tiny bit of code. Clearly know what the buttons do and whether which ones are toggled. This is nice. Anyone ever use live regions? Okay, you guys don't count. So this is cool. Here I'm saying this region here, which lists all the to-dos, is a real live. This changes sometimes. It's polite, which means it will just kind of tell you when it feels you're ready, when it stopped announcing the previous thing. You can also say it's assertive, and it will just yell at you right away, like, yes, yeah. So let's show that, because it's a really awesome thing, and it's so easy, like you see. Okay.
Voiceover on. Grown. By garlic. Unchecked. Checkbox. List 1 item. Show only active items. Selected. Toggle button. List 3 items. By garlic. Edit to do. Delete to do. Show only completed items. Selected. Toggle button.
Nothing here. Now, what I could do is have a little hidden thing in there that says
You are currently
no
on a toggle
tasks,
button
or just
inside
visually
the
indicate
list.
there are
To
no
select or
tasks.
deselect
But
this
I didn't
checkbox,
want to do
press
too much.
Control, Option, space.
Yes.
Voiceover off.
So this is as far as I got in the interactive demo. I was kind of thinking, oh, I should do a little made accessible by Jigfa in the bottom, but that's just hubris. But Larry says that's good, right? Double-click to edit to do is of course no longer relevant. So back to our themed presentation of tonight, if I can get us there. Yeah, isn't that nice? All right, cool, works. So, in conclusion, make it visible, make it usable, grokkable, and flexible. because this is now usable on a cell phone, on a small screen, on a large screen, by blind people, by speech to control technology. And it only took so much work. So why would you do this? Why, oh, why? I mean, okay, so about 10% of the world has some form of disability. See a couple of folks here with glasses. I only have one decent eye. Fuck 3D films, right? So you might decide to challenge Jamie and Conway to an arm wrestling contest. The next day you only have one arm, or you're on the internet and you only have one hand available, Lord knows why. Isn't it nice that you can just keyboard through web pages? Yes, that's nice, Job, you'll say. Like, yes, that's true. So it's also about quality, because you all say, oh, I write tests, I write documentation, I make sure my application is secure, right? Why not make it usable? Who are you making it for? Your users. Make it work for them. Yeah, but we're not getting blind people. They don't use our software because they're just sitting at home in a dark room waiting for somebody to pay them a pity visit. So it should be just part of your overall development process. Profit. Somebody can get to your site. Somebody can use it. They might turn into conversions. They might buy your product. Accessibility is profitability. Independence, very important. And we're all getting older. I mean, at some point, most of us will have some form of disability. So this is Pratik Patel. He's blind. He says, hey, Dell, you have captchas on your site. Blind or visually impaired people can see. I can't log in. And Dell says, oh, that's fine, Pratik. Yeah, we have captchas, but just get your friend to log in for you. You should have seen the replies to that. Somebody says, Dell cares my ass, which just didn't sound right. So yeah, just get your cripple buddy, because we all have one. And in some cases, it's a law. Because in America, there's Section 508. It mandates that any government site has to be accessible. It has to adhere to, the older version of the WCAG. And in Europe, there is legislation. Netherlands ratified it a couple of months ago in Parliament that says, okay, anything internal, anything external has to be accessible, especially shops. So that's important. It's going to get more and more important to make sure that all our stuff is accessible. And that's great. Information, the internet, access to digital information is considered a fundamental human right. So if you disallow access to it, you're discriminating based on Article 2. So it's also our job, because I don't know about all of you, but a lot of us are web developers. And we should be web developers, not crap developers. So please, design like you give a damn. At least that's what I try to do in my daily job. And it's easy. And I'm just going to show a bunch of patterns that we all can use that will make it so much easier. So I've been over this. You guys should all know this by now. Use semantic HTML. Hangers go to places. Buttons perform actions. Use ARIA if you really have to, if you can't avoid anything else. I mean, I saw some dojo code yesterday, a select box that they use, and it looks the same everywhere. But there was an amount of ARIA, div soup, tag soup in there. And you can make divs with spans and everything behave as a drop-down, and you can indicate it with ARIA attributes as a drop-down, but you got to script all the handlers. I mean, I can make a div be a link, but I'm going to have to script the click. I'm not going to be able to use my normal keyboard combinations on it to open it. I can't open it in a new tab because it's not next to a link. So if you don't have to use ARIA, please don't use it. Just use it to improve the accessibility of your DOM. Proper contrast. So Ovid isn't here. He's talking in the other room, so he can't yell at me. But this was Ovid giving his talk. And there were these links here, like blue and red. I asked him if I could do this. He's okay with it. So this is hard to read, contrast, but easy to fix. You see this a lot on the web. I mean, why isn't it going to? This, some other page, I won't name it, but I mean, you see it a lot. It's a common problem. Light text and white background. We saw earlier what that does. We didn't even know there was a checkbox there. So easy changes. Image alt text. Always have image alt text. Even if there's no image alt text, please have image alt text. If there's text like Pearl is alive, okay, cool. Let's also, that might be part of an image. So you have this big banner, it says Pearl's alive, and it's got Larry with a thumbs up. You'll also make sure that non-sighted people know what that content's about, because it's relevant to whatever you're trying to convey. If the context is also relevant in any other way, you also want to give an alt, like if it's a photo near a news article, or if it's just presentational, it's nothing, it's just a picture, give it an empty alt. It tells assistive technologies to ignore it. Form control labels. Very important, as I showed earlier. We associated the checkbox with the to-do item as its label, and suddenly we knew the context. So there's two ways. You associate the label with the input by its ID, or we can read this very well, but here the input is in the label. The first version is very much preferred. It works better in most browsers, at least last time I checked. So, make it navigable by keyboard, show the focus outline. It doesn't bother anybody. Why would you remove it? I mean, it's relevant to people using the keyboard, and they should just get to see it. And follow the user focus. If you're having lots of DOM scripting and you're throwing the user around, make sure that their focus isn't suddenly back to the top of the page, because they'll be confused, they won't know what's going on, they might not buy your product. Tab index. This is nice. So let's say you have a custom component that you made, and you want to be able to focus on it, but it's not natively focusable. Say it's a div. You give it a tab index of -1. It won't be tab focusable, but you can say javascript.focus, and then it will become focusable. If you also want it to become keyboard focusable, it becomes part of the natural order by giving it a tab index of 0. Please don't do this unless you have a very good reason and you know what you're doing. Because if you move one element out of the tab order, you have to move all of them. So, and it's just endless loop of, oh yeah, redo the tab index. It's usually a bad idea, so try to avoid it. Sectioning. This is nice. This is semantics. So, whoopie. Oh well, that's for after. So use navs, use header, main footer. Most of you will already be using this, but it's just good to do. What else? Oh yes, headings, but you knew that was coming. H1 to H6. In general, if you use headings, only use one H1 per page. Start with an H1 per page, and make them follow the correct levels. To screen readers, this is very nice because it shows the outline of the document, which content is relevant where. And it's very easy. You can have as many H2 and H3s and whatever as you want. Just make them follow in the correct order. Skip links. Anyone use those? They're nice. You can have them visible or invisible, but they're basically just links to say, skip straight to content, and then as a keyboard user, you don't have to. If it's like a huge table of like pro commits, you can just skip to newest. And it's just easier for keyboard navigation. And they're quite effortless, and they don't bother anybody. Captures. Oh, those are lovely, aren't they? So, which one's the cupcake? Which one's the chihuahua? Please. Please pick out all the chihuahuas. You are guilty, and you'd better, you know, we're gonna have all of you round up. We're gonna all, you know, what is this called? Fouiller you and find out if you're guilty, because, you know, so, and also we want you to fix our spam problem, so you'd better indicate that you're human. You're all guilty, and they're also hard to see, and if they're a hearing alternative, they're often hard to hear, and if there's a mathematics alternative, and I'm not good at math, you know that, Dakar, I mean, I don't want those, because 4 plus 4, no. So, I understand the reason for captchas, but if you can avoid them, if there's a better way, please don't use them, because they make the web so much worse. We saw that with Pratik Patel. Oh yeah, just get your friend to do it. Don't disable the viewport zoom. I was at a website like, oh, please come work for us as a front-end developer. I said, okay, only if I can fix your viewport zoom, because you've disabled it. And there was a picture, and I couldn't zoom in on it, but clearly there was a very interesting picture, but I couldn't zoom because they had disabled pinch zoom. So please don't do this, because it says the maximum scale is the same as the initial scale, and it will scale to your viewport if they built it correctly. And please don't turn off viewport. I mean, why would you disable that? The web is responsive. You never know what your user is viewing your site in. On the internet, nobody knows if you're a dog, nobody knows if you have some old cell phone, new cell phone, screen reader, desktop computer. Do I have time? 11:44, I have 15 minutes. Yes, okay, cool. I'm gonna bore you guys with progressive enhancements. This is the hippie shit everybody wants, nobody gets. So, progressive enhancement, show of hands. You all know it, right? Cool. So I don't have to talk about it? No. You're gonna get it. So, basically we start with HTML. And it's like an ogre, it has layers. So, HTML is the first part. It's the first part that gets loaded, so please get it right. Then we style the HTML with CSS and we improve behavior with JavaScript if it's available. But the idea of progressive enhancement is you don't make any assumptions. You assume, okay, there's something here that knows how to read a web page. That's all I know, so I'd better indicate my DOM clearly. It talks about separation of concerns. So we have structure, styling, behavior. Just make it work first. Make the HTML work. Then make it responsive. We all know that. You know, just make sure it scales well. But that's CSS, and I'm really not going to get into that too much. So you can JavaScript Angular via reactive Electron UI. If you want, you can. Because progressive enhancement says, okay, your HTML will always be available. All the actions that any user has to be able to do on your website to fit your product, that user should be able to do, JavaScript or not. That's the whole deal. If you want to hijack the entire DOM with JavaScript and make it a single page application, you can. That's fine. That's perfect. Use JavaScript for what it's good for, but make sure it also works without it. So you can use async requests and routing and turn links into buttons, but you start with links because you start with just HTML. I mean, what's the point of a button in just HTML apart from submitting a form, which usually you do with input to submit. Local storage modals, I mean, yeah, how are you going to do those without JavaScript? That's tricky. So basically you do feature detection. You check to see, I mean, I tend to just have a class of Node.js on the body. I remove it if I have JavaScript. And then I know if that class is there, stuff I can show, DOM I can hide or toggle. It's basically just a big toggle switch. And then I try to load JavaScript. And if it loads, then starts hijacking the DOM, turns links into buttons, adds behavior, maybe just hijacks the entire DOM and loads this big Angular application and then drains your mobile battery. So I found that a nice way to do that on the back-end side, so let's say we're dealing with Dancer here. You have a model. It has a bunch of functions. And if you have a good model, it's a lot of little composable functions. This is good practice, we all know this. But if you then have your view, you can have snippets. So let's say our to-do application. Your view would just by default render all your to-dos. But let's say you add you delete one or you add one or somebody else adds one and you make it collaborative. Then you want to update the DOM dynamically if somebody else adds a to-do, and you have a snippet that just can render one to-do, and when you render the entire HTML, you use that same snippet in a loop to render the entire list of to-dos. So you can just reuse all those things by composing all these small parts into either your partial DOM, which you can load via JavaScript, or your entire DOM, which you just render on page load. So in your controller, if you have these handlers, then you can use content negotiation to indicate on the client side, what am I looking for? Am I looking for the entire page? Is this just text HTML I'm expecting? Then I'm just going to render you your entire page. But if I have these small partial handlers, I can say, okay, I expect the content negotiation of application JSON, or I mean, I just like to throw HTML around from my handlers. I render the snippet on the server side. I'm not going to bother the client because I don't know what kind of device it is. It might be very slow, or I might almost be out of battery. I do all the heavy offloading on the server, pass the snippet in there, just clunk it in the DOM, and we're golden. So that was progressive enhancement. There's of course a whole lot more to it, but there's if you started from the beginning in your process, then it's not really all that hard. But yeah, bolting it on later, bolting accessibility on later, usability, all that good stuff, that's always going to be a pain. So there's a bunch of tools we can use to make sure that our stuff works. So there's DQ, they're an accessibility company. They have X and Wave. Those are tools. Wave, for instance, you load in your browser, same for X really, and you can say analyze this page, and we'll tell you all the low-hanging fruit. This doesn't have an alt image. This is, what else? Well, there's probably a whole bunch more I can think of now. Improper heading use. There There's Chrome accessibility tools. Those are also on the store. They're really nice. There's Tenon.io, which is a paid service. It's the absolute best, but it's paid. Disclaimer: one of my clients. But you can try it out online. Just go to Tenon.io, put your favorite site in there. It gives you an analysis, tells you here's the problem, here's the violation of the WCAG spec, and here's how you fix it. TPG, that's an accessibility company, the Pichello Group. They have a contrast checker. You can download it. You give it 2 colors. Tells you, okay, this passes the spec. This passes WCAG AA, which are compliance levels. Sorry, I forgot to mention. There's level A, AA, and AAA. And AAA is like all your videos have to have sign language. It's really extreme. WCAG AA is in general the good middle way of making stuff works. But in general, please don't try to do checkbox accessibility. Make usable accessibility. So contrast checker is nice. Filament Group has a whole bunch of tools to dynamically load CSS, deal with responsive images, and there's a whole list of tools on the website. So there's a bunch of assistive technology. There's NVDA, which is a free screen reader. You can download this, use it on Windows. It's written by blind people. I went through the source code once. Think of endless lines of C++ without new lines or spaces. Orca's on Linux, it's on GNOME. VoiceOver, it comes with your Mac. Apple and accessibility is really awesome. I got to give them credit for that. High contrast mode, all that good stuff. Dragon, it's speech control. So you can tell your computer, click this, type that, dictate. Dragon also relies on your DOM being correct. If Dragon doesn't know what you're trying to control, if it doesn't know what is there. Dolphin, also know Supernova, it's just a competing screen reader. JAWS is extremely expensive. It's like how much? Right, it's quite expensive. So it's da-dum. So a bunch of links, or anchors, if you may. It's going to be on SlideShare. I don't expect you to remember all this. WCAG is nice. It's kind of, because the WCAG is really, really, really dry. The WCAG is nice. And there's also the quick references. If you get into this, you'll find quickly all these resources. And accessibility community is a very nice, tight group. Books, Apps for All, Hayden Pickering. These are mostly, if not all, on Safari. If you have Safari, please check them out. Hayden is a great writer. These are all very small patterns. Nee? So this is a really awesome book. All these little patterns, basically, lots of stuff I said you'd find in there. Adaptive web design. It's a more also a lot of ideology in that book, but it's nice to read. A web for everyone. That's kumbaya hippie stuff, but it's really good. Designing with Progressive Enhancement by the Filament Group. It's an older one, but it has solid principles in there. The Book Apart series. They have some stuff on responsive design, and they're good books. Norman Nielsen, same Norman from the Design of Everyday Things. Lots of you might have read that in college. Very good book. They have a lot of publications on why hamburger menus are bad usability, how short-term memory works when reading a web page, how people read a web page, how certain anti-patterns make people misunderstand your stuff. Steve Crook's book, Don't Make Me Think, and Rocket Surgery Made Easy. Great stuff on usability and user testing. And all right, almost done. And thanks for coming. I really liked, spending the laugh about inclusive design, and you're awesome. Thanks. Any questions?
So how do you deal with people who say, this is a JavaScript app, there is no such thing as a degraded version of a level function running in a dollar sign?
So the question is, how do you deal with these? Okay, we started out with the single page app. It's JavaScript heavy. Basically just talks to an API maybe. How do we make that accessible? Now, you can't make progressive enhancement work. It just won't work. So the only way I can see is either you sneak in accessibility, because you can make JavaScript accessible. You can use live regions and area labels. It works. It's just you can't guarantee that somebody without a fat pipe and a modern device can use your page. So, I mean, progressive enhancement is the gold standard. It's nice if you can get it, but you can make stuff accessible and work for everybody without it. If you otherwise, just try to sneak it in. Look, you can say, okay, depends on your market. If you say, okay, we have a high chance of people with in developing countries using our product, they might not have these fat internet connections. So try to frame it as risk management. That's probably your best deal. Anyone else?
In terms of usability,
Yeah.
I always default to usability. It's always, but obviously there are other disabilities. If you've got it for working with screens, can you sort of consider if that would be working with all disabilities, or is there other factors again?
Well, making it work on a screen reader also depends because all these screen readers have different bugs. So in general, try to make it semantic and then enhance it. I know what you're saying, but in general, if it works, then it's a good start. Test, always test. You can't assume it works. Automated tooling will only catch so much. So you always gotta have testing. Good point, by the way. There are companies like Loop 11, and you can hire. They have very varied people that you can have test your site, and that's their specialty. So the diversified user testing. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah. Yeah, there's a list that Carl Groves maintains. You can find it. Karl Groves, Groves. He's a guy behind Tenon, big into accessibility. That's an understatement. So you can do honeypot traps. You can do log analysis. I mean, but if you're going to default to the user is not the problem, the user isn't guilty by default, the user is not my spam filter, then you're always going to have to do your own checks. So you can have the hidden text field in a form, and if it gets submitted by a bot, you can assume it's fake. But there's only so much you can do without just putting a big wall up there and saying, you know, you'd better bend over and cuff. Because that just, no. So, yeah, sorry about that. There's really not a better solution I can think of right now. Anyone? All right, cool. Thanks for listening.